Um, let's get to another topic. One of the great trends, I think, and I know that you see it the same, is energy. Regardless of the United States is in a recession or not, the rest of the world, at least till now, isn't really in a recession. And even in the United States, I think the amount of power which is needed to fulfill all the requirements is increasing. What's your opinion to the energy complex?
Well, of course, there's always two parts to a market story, supply and demand. In the first instance, with regards to demand, those of us in the West, be it in Europe or the United States, have thought of ourselves for the last 30 years as being the market. But that's no longer the case. In fact, in emerging economies, they're becoming bit by bit more liberalized. And as a consequence of poor people becoming freer, they're becoming richer. And as poor people's wealth increases, their energy uses increase dramatically. People in those countries want to live like you and I do. And to do that requires a lot of energy. So demand for energy is increasing rapidly per capita, spread over billions of capitas. You and I have to compete to buy oil with people from India and Indonesia that wanted to compete with us in the past but didn't have the money. They have the money now. That's the demand side. The supply side is equally interesting and perhaps less well known. Most people in the world believe that oil is produced by the big companies, the Shells, the Exxons, the Totals, the BPs. They do produce some oil, but most oil in the world is produced by state oil companies, companies under the control of political authorities. And in many countries, those political authorities have diverted most of the free cash flow from their oil and gas industry to domestically expedient political programs, leaving too little money in the domestic oil and gas industry to replace production. So it's my belief that several national oil companies, prominently among them Mexico, Venezuela, Peru, Ecuador, Indonesia, and perhaps even Iran, will cease to be oil exporters in the next 5 years. This combination of increasing demand and decreasing supplies inevitably will result, I believe, in sharply higher energy prices, not only for oil and gas, but across the spectrum.
Which kind of energy could profit from this direction if really oil, in your scenario, I think it has to go up? Maybe not in the next 6 months, but at least in the longer term. So which kinds of the energy supply would be a huge profit?
Well, oil's the obvious beneficiary because it's still so broadly used as a motor fuel. We haven't managed in any country to substitute natural gas for oil as a motor fuel yet. This will come. So the first and most obvious beneficiary, with oil use increasing and oil supply decreasing, given the vast nature of the oil market, the place that you start, of course, is in the oil business. Natural gas is tougher to describe as an industry because it isn't a worldwide industry like oil. It's a bunch of localized industries. There are some parts of the world, like the United States, where natural gas is in very strong supply. There are other parts of the world, Japan, Turkey, places like that, where gas is ironically in short supply. So you have to look at that as a bunch of fragmented markets, which takes longer than we would have for this interview, sadly. I am attracted, as I believe you are, to the uranium business. It's been a wild cycle, of course, in 1998, 1999, 2000, really cheap, free, hated. 2004, 2005, 2006, everybody loved it. What's ironic is that the price of the uranium shares began to fall in 2006, not because the story wasn't true anymore, but because people's expectations for those shares was so outlandish that they couldn't possibly be met. And this is where I think the value comes into the play. An incredible amount of money got raised in uranium in the 2004, 2005, 2006 timeframe and was deployed. Prior to that, for 25 years, nobody looked for uranium because the price was low. And of course, when nobody looks for something, nobody finds anything. The money that has been deployed since the boom is beginning to find things. And so we're in a discovery cycle in uranium. It is in the discovery cycle where the real wealth has been created. So just as the outlook for the uranium industry is getting better and better and better, investors' tolerance for uranium stocks is verging on disgust. That to me as a contrarian is a spectacular thing where I understand that an industry is getting better. I know how to look at the stocks, and all of my competitors are selling them because they're sick of them.
Even the price of uranium, I think, at least has some room to go to the upside. It's not has not increased in the last months or the last 2 years to much higher levels. It's still depressed. Do you see even a climbing uranium price?
Oh, I do. I think an increase in the price in uranium is inevitable. You know, the last 6 or 7 years, we've lived in the sense that we've generated electricity from uranium that was downcycled from weapons grade to regular fuel. Those stocks are inevitably decreasing, and the Russians rationally would like to control the process on a going forward basis. They understand that to grow their own economy, they're going to need that fuel. At the same time, countries around the world that can afford it are understanding that baseload uranium energy is a very stable and secure form of energy. So nuclear plant construction is going on, not in your country, not in my country, but in other countries. And what's interesting about that is that the lenders who lend the money to build these nuclear power plants have figured out that on a going forward basis, nuclear fuel is going to be in short supply. So as a consequence, people who loan, say, $4 billion to build a nuclear power plant increasingly are requiring the borrower to contract for enough nuclear energy, uranium, on a going forward basis that amortizes a 30-year loan. What that means is that more and more of the fuel is contracted for on longer and longer fixed terms. It's also interesting to note that the fuel cost, the uranium cost, is a tiny component of the finished cost of electrical energy, as little as 3%. So what's interesting about it is that on the one hand, I think the price of uranium has to go up because it costs a lot to produce it. And on the other hand, it can go up because if the price of uranium doubled, the impact it would have on the retail fuel, on the retail electrical price to the consumer would be irrelevant.